Hello, this is hands-on continuous integration and delivery with Jenkins X and Kubernetes. This is section 3, Jenkins X build packs. In this section, we will look at Jenkins X build packs, choosing a build pack YAML, build pack inheritance, and overriding build pack defaults. Jenkins X build packs. In this video, we will look at Jenkins X build packs, what they are and what they're for, build steps within the build pack, and build pack repositories. In our previous section, we looked at adding an application to Jenkins X, either using a quick start or importing existing code. And then, looking at this architecture diagram, we focused on the build controller, which in our case is prow. We focused on some of the Kubernetes resources that Jenkins X creates in order to deploy our application, and we looked at tracking our application through the build and deployment process as we looked at inspecting the activities and the build logs. But we didn't focus on the details of the pipeline activity. That's what we're going to look at in this section. So there was something missing from what we looked at in the previous section. We didn't look at how Jenkins X knows the details behind what to do to build and deploy our software. We had a quick start that was based on Spring Boot in Java, and Jenkins X knew to run Gradle. It knew how to start that Java application once it was compiled and built into a Docker image. We had another application that was JavaScript, and Jenkins X knew to run npm install, and it knew to run npm start inside the Docker container once the software was deployed to Kubernetes. Now, the way that Jenkins X knew how to do that was through the use of a build pack. A build pack provides Jenkins X with instructions for building and deploying software. So it tells Jenkins X what all of the individual steps are that need to happen to build, run any tests, and then package into a Docker container and then deploy using Helm. Jenkins X comes with a default build pack for many different programming languages and build tools. So for example, there is a Gradle Jenkins X build pack that comes as a default, and that's where these Gradle instructions were. And there is a JavaScript Node.js Jenkins build pack that knows how to run npm in order to set up and start the application. Let's take a few minutes and we'll illustrate exactly how Jenkins X uses build packs to drive the build and the deployment process. We'll start out by importing a brand new application into Jenkins X. It'll be the same Express Hello application that we saw before. I'm just going to give it a different name so it doesn't collide with any applications that you might have in your Jenkins X cluster that I have in my Jenkins X cluster. So as before, we'll start out with the jx import command. I'll give it the name of the directory that the code is in. And then again, because of the way my Jenkins X cluster is configured, I'm adding the get public feature. You may or may not have to do that. We'll go through these steps again. And in this particular case, I won't make you watch this because you watched it already. We'll just come back when all of this is finished. Okay, and here we are back. We have imported our application. We can verify that with jx get applications. We can see that the new Hello Video 3.1 has been added. We have a third application in here. We can also look at the activities related to this specific application. So we just type jx get activity -f, which is for filter, based on the name of the application. And what you see is that there are a bunch of steps that happened in order to build this application. We see some build npm install, build npm test, so some standard stuff that we would expect to see for a JavaScript application that uses Node.js. But how did Jenkins X know how to do this? Well, this is where the build pack comes in. So let's go into our directory with our new application and have a look around. So you can see that there are a number of files here. There are more files than we had before we did the import. And one of the files that I want to show you is this Jenkins-x.yml. As you can see, there's not a lot of content here. It just declares buildpack JavaScript. So this is not the actual steps to do JavaScript, but at least it does tell Jenkins X, I want you to use that default JavaScript build pack. Now, if we want to look at the actual steps, we want to look at the real build pack, we have a couple of options. Jenkins X does clone the Git repositories that those build packs live in. It pulls them down, they're from GitHub, and it makes them available on our local file system in our home directory under .jx. So let's go ahead and take a look. We'll start with our home directory and then .jx. Then we're going to go into a directory called draft. And in here, we see a directory called packs. That's the only directory in there. If we look in packs, we then see a reference to GitHub. Again, that's the only directory that's in here. And then we see a reference to the group within GitHub, the organization where these are located. This is Jenkins X build packs. That's the organization. And now if we get to this level, we're going to find that we have a couple of choices. We have one that's called Classic and the other one that's called Kubernetes. So there are actually two repositories that contain default build packs for Jenkins X. We'll look at the specifics of each one as we look at inheritance in a later video. For right now, I'm just going to show the Classic one because that contains the interesting JavaScript build items. So if we go into the Classic directory, I won't make you look at all of the build packs that are in here. There's several, but I will show you the contents of the JavaScript build pack. And you can see there's a pipeline.yaml file. Now, at this point, you're like, okay, that was a little bit involved. You made me list the contents of some directory that was 10 deep. Don't you have a better way to do it? And yes, I do. Obviously, because these are on GitHub, we can just go straight to our browser and we can look at them that way as well. So let's go ahead and we'll do that. So here we are looking at the repository that contains the build packs we saw on the file system. It's in the Jenkins X build packs organization, and the repository is called Jenkins X Classic. If we click through to the packs directory and then JavaScript, we see that pipeline.yaml file that we saw on the file system. Now, there's a lot of content here that includes a number of different stages, but you'll notice that within the build steps, we have an npm install and then an npm test. So this is finally the point at which we see how Jenkins X is instructed for a JavaScript build. These are the specific commands to run in order to build and test this software. We can verify that these are the actual commands that we should be using if we jump over and we take a look at the build log. So the build log is another thing that we saw in section 2, and we'll use that same command we used before. I'll filter again to just the application we're interested in. And if we look at the latest, we see there is a bunch of output here, but we'll scroll up past this till we get to the build section. And you'll notice as we get into the build section, it says, okay, this is from a build pack. And you'll notice it's step build, which matches what we saw in the YAML file. And it's running an npm install. And we see the actual output from the npm install here, added 50 packages. And then we see as we run npm test, and we see the output from running test on our source as well. So we see exactly the same instructions actually executed, actually carried out in our build that we saw defined in the build pack. So we've definitely nailed down exactly how Jenkins X knew how to build and test a JavaScript application. So that concludes our look at build packs, at least our introduction.